Hey everyone, it's Alexis Wolf again. We are back in Looking for God, Volume 1. We are in Chapter 2, Holy Spirit Leading. I knew someone once who worshiped in a quieter church. She got fired up and began speaking in tongues when no one else in the congregation was, or ever did for that matter. She would cry aloud and speak in tongues during service with no one to interpret. The elders went to her several times and asked her to stop because it was a disruption. She refused, became offended, and left the church begrudgingly when they asked her to either quieten herself or find another place of worship that was conducive to her particular style. This congregant, to be absolutely certain, was out of line both with the Lord and with the authorities over that particular church. The Lord will never lead you in your spirit to be disruptive so that the attention is drawn to you. Any authentic disruption of God will draw attention to and glorify Him alone. If you feel you need to find another place where they worship in the way you currently worship, so be it. That's okay. Do not act out because you feel like it and have the attitude in your heart that you will do as you please and call it Holy Spirit leading. That is rebellion because you are not obeying the authority set over you in that church. In addition, we must realize that God is a God of order. What I am saying is simply to follow the Holy Spirit and not the crowd, all the while being respectful of the general worship. God never interrupts himself and he never causes his people to act foolishly so as to drive people away from him. All gifts of the Spirit and moves of the Holy Spirit are for drawing people to Christ's bosom. When with the Jews, be like a Jew, the Greeks as the Greek, and so on. Notice the words of Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 19 through 23. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, so that I might win the Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, as without law, though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might win those who are without law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that I may by all means save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it. Basically speaking, Paul instructs us to use discernment coupled with Holy Spirit's direction. We are not to conform to the ways of the world, but we are to make ourselves like those we're around so as to have access to all. In reference to worship, if it is in accordance to the type of worship at a particular congregation and you are truly led by God and not emotions in a way different than the majority, go with what he's telling you. Otherwise, if you are like the aforementioned person, you will draw attention only to yourself, and that is self-worship and not God worship. Be balanced in all of your ways and be respectful of others. Be certain that if the Spirit leads you to speak when others are silent, you have correctly discerned it as Holy Spirit instead of emotions. And I think I'm going to chop up this chapter because there's quite a few things. Yeah, there are quite a few things I want to cover, but I want to take it slowly for those who aren't maybe as far as some other people. So we want to take it so that we are able to understand it and digest it and properly apply it to everyday life. And that's what it's all about. So basically what that was talking about in that first section of chapter 2 is that there are times when God will definitely cause a disruption and he will speak in a way that doesn't really go with the flow of whatever you're in. But that it's not always the case because a lot of people do. They go, "Oh, Jesus, I'm Holy Spirit led," and I don't mean to mock, but I'm saying sometimes people they get in this weird fleshly emotional state, and they're like, "Oh, hoobaloo blooby, whatever," and they start acting like something contrary to what the environment is in which they are stationed. But if that is not Holy Spirit led, it's nothing but drawing attention to self. It's kind of just a look at me show. And it's ridiculous. And unfortunately, it happens all the time because people want that attention, but they want to say it's God, but it's not God. It's themselves. So we need to be very cautioned to recognize that if we are in our spirit, we are moved to do something that is adverse to wherever we are. make sure you are tapped into the Spirit of God, because otherwise you are offering room for a lot of other spirits to come in that are not of God. So we'll leave it at that and pick up next time. Thanks.